No one remembers the exact moment when a life begins to fall apart. There is no clear sound. There is no visible sign. It simply happens, slowly. For Gabriel, it all began the day Valeria stopped looking him in the eyes. There was no argument. There were no screams. Only silence. She was sitting across from him, hands clasped together, staring at an invisible point on the wall. Gabriel spoke. He tried to explain that things would get better, that it was just a phase, that he would find a job, that money wasn't everything. But Valeria was no longer there. "I can't keep living like this," she finally said. "This isn't what I dreamed of for my life." Gabriel felt his chest tighten. "Like this how?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. She took a deep breath. "Without stability. Without a future. Living on promises." She didn't say, "without money." There was no need. Valeria stood up, grabbed her bag, and before leaving, dropped the sentence that would follow Gabriel for years. "I love you. But love doesn't pay the bills." The door closed. And with it, something inside Gabriel broke too. For weeks, Gabriel wandered through the city like a ghost. The mornings were long. The nights, endless. He slept in a small apartment that now felt too big and empty. The walls held memories. Laughter, plans, promises whispered softly. He had studied. He had worked. But life, unpredictable as always, left him unemployed after a series of cutbacks. Then came the debts. Then, wounded pride. And finally, loneliness. Every time he saw couples walking hand in hand, something burned inside him. It wasn't envy. It was the feeling of not having been enough. "If I had more, she would have stayed." That thought became a constant shadow. One rainy night, Gabriel sat on a bench in the plaza. He had nowhere to go. No one to talk to. He watched people pass by. Some in a hurry. Others laughing. Others simply surviving. Like him. Then he saw an old man trying to gather papers the wind had scattered. Without thinking, Gabriel stood up to help him. "Thank you, young man," the old man said. Few people stop these days. His name was Samuel. He had a calm voice. The kind that brings peace. They talked for a bit. Nothing deep. Nothing forced. Before leaving, Samuel said something Gabriel would never forget. "When everything falls apart, it's not the end. It's the space life creates. To build something different." Gabriel smiled, politely. He didn't fully believe it. But those words stayed there. Latent. Days later, without knowing exactly why, Gabriel began to write. Not to publish. Not to make money. Just to empty what he carried inside. He wrote at dawn. With cheap coffee and the distant noise of the city. He wrote about abandonment. About the fear of not being enough. About loving and losing. One day he decided to share one of those texts online. He expected nothing. But something happened. People began to comment. To say they felt identified. That his words had made them cry. For the first time in months, Gabriel felt something other than pain. He felt meaning. It didn't happen overnight. But slowly, his life began to move. A small project arrived. Then another. And then, an opportunity he never would have imagined. He didn't become rich. He didn't become famous. But he believed in himself again. He smiled again, without guilt. A year later, Gabriel walked through the same plaza. The sun was soft. The air different. Then he saw her. Valeria. She was sitting in a cafe, looking at her phone with a tired expression. For a moment, he thought about walking on. But something stopped him. Their eyes met. Surprise. And silence. "Hi, Gabriel," she finally said. "Hi, Valeria." They talked. About life. About time. She noticed something different about him. It wasn't the clothes. It wasn't the money. It was the calm. You look good. More confident. Gabriel smiled. I learned to be with myself. Valeria lowered her gaze. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake. Gabriel took a deep breath. Maybe. We both needed that ending. She nodded, her eyes shining. They said goodbye. And this time, it didn't hurt. Months later, Gabriel met someone. It wasn't an instant love. It was calm. Real. Someone who didn't ask how much he had, but who he was. And then he understood. Sometimes life takes someone away from you. Not because you're not enough, but because you deserve something that fits better with the person you are becoming. She left him for having nothing. But she lost someone who, even with nothing, had everything to build. And he lost someone who didn't know how to wait, but gained himself. Because when love leaves due to lack of money, destiny responds with something far more valuable. Purpose, growth, and a love that doesn't depend on material things.